Hello, everybody. Yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome to our speakers right here. Welcome to some of our attendees that we know that you're coming in. As you're settling in, just wanted to thank you all for making the time to be here in this really impactful conversation. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about caregivers and how caregivers can really be an amazing support for youth mental health, but also how caregivers can be an amazing influence to shape the systems that we have to better support youth mental health. And so as you're all settling in and just like coming into this conversation, just wanted to give a little bit of background on what the Headstream Learning Hub is all about. This is a webinar series hosted by Headstream Innovation, bringing together passionate voices to explore all things youth mental health. And so you're going to see us sometimes in webinars, you're going to see us sometimes in live stream sessions, you're going to see us like across different formats. And today it's a webinar. And so, yeah, something that we're going to be trying to do this time is we're going to be recording this conversation just because, there's people that are able to join, some people that register, but then they're not able to show up, some people that they're just not able to join at this time of the day. And so we want to make sure that these recordings can actually like reach other horizons, other audiences that might be interested in these very important conversations. And so we're going to be promoting and distributing this webinar after it's finalized through that recording so that we can, have more visibility on this topic. And so welcome everybody. My name is Viviana Bloomberg. I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for Headstream. I was honestly not supposed to be here today. I was supposed to be like more on the back end of this conversation, but unfortunately our amazing facilitator, Amaya, she was she tested positive for COVID, unfortunately, and so she's not going to be able to join. And so I'm stepping in here. So I would appreciate some grace as I'm just like navigating this new stage for me. But yeah, really excited to be part of this conversation and really bringing in the amazing speakers that we have for today. And so, as I mentioned, Viviana Bloomberg, Marketing Communications Manager. I have a little bit of expertise on marketing communications is my strongest suit for sure. I'm originally from Mexico City, moved to the United States about 5 years ago, really looking to find something that could be more meaningful for me. And that's what led me to Headstream. And so super happy to be here and just joining these amazing conversations. And so without any further ado, I'm gonna introduce our speakers, starting with Maria Barrera, who is the founder and SEO and CEO of Clayful. So Maria, if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and you can do like a quick introduction, that would be great.
Yes, definitely. You're doing a great job, by the way. You're rocking it. So everybody, I'm Maria, and I am the CEO and founder of Clayful. At Clayful, we partner with schools to provide on-demand coaching for students, educators, and now caregivers. And you'll hear more about why in this conversation. So really excited to talk about our learnings, everything that we've done to enroll caregivers in this process. I'm from Colombia, moved to the US when I was 10, and I'm really passionate about this topic because in Latin cultures, we don't tend to talk about mental health as openly as in others. So this being able to reach families and caregivers is a big part of the work that we want to do. So thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you all today.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I can confirm Latin cultures, we don't speak about youth mental health or mental health as a whole. Moving now on to Mary Gubisberg. Mary is a parent coach at MKG. And so, Mary, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Welcome. Happy to, and thank you. Thrilled to be with you all and great to learn together. Yes, my name is Mary Gugisberg. I am the owner and founder of MKG Parent Coach, which stands for Mindfulness, Kindness, and Gratitude. It's really the foundation of what I get to do is support parents, caregivers, educators in bringing that into all situations. I too get to hang out with caregivers who, guys, sometimes my clients are saying, I learned how to parent from everything that I've seen on TV. We need to help build their toolkits and just give them the resources to really know how to show up. I get to tell you a little bit more about my signature. What I get to do is practice the pause, and I'll tell you more about that. But what an honor to join you all and really help equip and just give guidance and support to caregivers, to educators, to entrepreneurs, to anyone really. We all need to build our more tools to show up and really care for our kids.
Love that, Mary. Thank you so much for sharing. I think, a lot of parents are just learning as they go, and nobody really teach people on how to be parents. So I think, yeah, what you're saying is super, super important. Now, yeah, passing the microphone to you, Malika.
Thank you so much, Viviana. Really grateful for you facilitating this conversation. And then also very grateful to be in a room with Maria, Mary, Craig, who are doing incredible work in this space. And then all of you who decided to join today, and really excited to just learn from the collective conversation. My name is Malika, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Psyche Care, where we are empowering caregivers with the skills to independently manage their child's mental wellness at home. We focus on supporting caregivers, so parents and legal guardians of youth who are ages around 6 to 17 that are facing the higher acuity symptoms, such as suicidality, self-harming behaviors, disordered eating, etc. The way that we support these caregivers is we pair them with a family peer expert. So this is someone with lived experience in navigating systems on behalf of their loved ones, who we've trained and are just excited to give back to the community. We're able to connect them via telehealth, telephone, and text, and caregivers can receive support daily, weekly, and monthly if they so choose. The reason why I'm particularly excited about this conversation is I believe that mental health supports in the US are incredibly individualized. However, relational health is health. And the fact that we're opening a door to a conversation around caregivers, family mental health, and how we can better serve our communities, I'm just really excited about what's to be born out of conversations like this. And once again, very grateful to be a part of it.
Wonderful, Malika. Thank you so much for that introduction. Craig, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you're our final speaker.
Okay, very good. So it's really good to be here. My name is Craig DeLarge, and I've worn a lot of hats over many years in this area. Generally, I'm a digital mental health strategist, researcher, and educator. I have, in addition to that, been the caregiver of a severely mentally ill loved one for about 18 years now. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and also a grandfather, and also a board member of a local chapter of the National Alliance for Mental Illness here in Philadelphia, where I live. And so, as you can imagine, I feel particularly inspired and urgent about the role of the caregiver, and feel that it's a role that's been neglected, but where there is a lot of potential for engagement, involvement, and education in order to address stigma, wellness, prevention, and care. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Craig. That was beautifully said. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the speakers that they're just presented. I know that we're going to have a very rich and meaningful conversation today, but before we actually get into the meat of the content, we're going to be just launching really quickly some questions to the audience to better understand, where you're coming from, what's a little bit of your background, so we can better tailor this conversation to something that can be really valuable for each one of you. And so you're going to be seeing that poll popping on your screens. If you can take a couple of minutes to just respond to those questions, that would be awesome. And then once you're done responding to those questions, we're going to be sharing the results to everybody so we can all understand, who is in the room, and that we can have a better conversation on that. We have 7 out of 9. We're gonna give it other 30 seconds just for people to respond to these questions. And then we're gonna be showing the results. Thank you to all the people that have already responded to these questions, by the way. Okay, so now we have the results in. So yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs and some caregivers. And then people who are currently a primary caregiver for someone who struggles with their mental health. 43% said yes, 57 said no. And how well equipped do they feel? Most of them responded somewhat equipped. So this is great, and I think this can be like really informative for us to better, respond to the questions that we have already prepared for these conversations. But this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this information. And so now moving on to what's going to be happening next. As I mentioned, we have a set of 5 questions. We're going to be spending about 5 minutes for each one of those questions, and we're going to have 2 of our amazing speakers responding to each one of those questions. But if any of you in the audience have specific questions that are coming up for each one of you as we're navigating those specific questions, please feel free to just, ask anything that you want using the Q&A feature on Zoom. You're gonna be able to find it there. It's like a box with a question mark inside and says Q&A on the button. And then I'm gonna be the one kind of like bringing these questions up as the panelists are speaking for the questions that we have already prepared. And so with that said, let's move on to the first question. Awesome. So the first question is, how do you recommend reframing the narrative around overcoming caregiver stigma to partnering with caregivers is an opportunity to ensure youth mental health is supported in and outside of school? So we're going to start on this one with Malika. Is that okay for you? Because I know you have a lot of experience on this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to start off on this question because I think there is a large elephant in the room that we don't often get to talk about, which is the fact that a lot of innovators and people that are pushing the boundaries on what's known in youth mental health avoid addressing this bias that we have, which is that caregiver stigma is an obstacle. I remember very early on in building Psyche, speaking to another youth mental health innovator who had said, bad parents are bad parents, and I can't really engage these families that don't want to bring their kids in for youth mental health care or don't want to engage. And I would really encourage us to focus on partnership as an opportunity, right? Shifting our mindset and our messaging, the verbiage that we use, the way that we call into caregivers to make them feel like they are an asset in their family's mental health rather than a barrier or a distraction. So the first thing that we really focus on at Psyche, and we learned after interviewing hundreds of caregivers across the nation, is start off with that empathy and understanding. So understanding kind of the foundational reasons why caregiver stigma is such a thing, whether it's specific cultural contexts, a place of fear, a feeling like, I was born into this role, I should know how to be a parent. These are all kind of born out of systemic barriers, cultural barriers, and things entirely out of our control. It's not really born out of a place of malice, right? So being able to acknowledge that upfront before even opening up a conversation really allows for caregivers to feel welcomed in, instead of building resistance between us as innovators, practitioners, clinicians, community leaders, and caregivers. The next thing that I really like to focus on is framing the caregiver as a key asset to building resilience and recovery in youth mental wellness. We primarily work with caregivers that are transitioning out of inpatient care or emergency departments. And a lot of the verbiage I tend to hear is, caregivers, they don't know how to navigate next steps, or they don't know what to do, or they don't know how to open the conversation. But when we talk to caregivers, they say, look, I'm bearing this 24/7 burden of not knowing what to do and wanting to make sure that my kid is alive, healthy, and well. So how about we reframe that to say, what are the extra supports that we can offer caregivers in this period of transition instead of isolating them away from the process of recovery? How do we really meet them where they're at and equip them with the tools that they are actively seeking, to make them feel like they are a part of the process and really opted into care? And then finally, the power of co-creation, verbiage, and building bridges in developing youth mental health solutions, right? I know Headstream talks a lot about co-creation with youth, and I find that to be really powerful. And for us as innovators, we wanted to bring in co-creation with caregivers. Sometimes when you're using diagnoses and, mental health specific terms, that can really isolate caregivers that are scared of having this as the first touch point into mental wellness and care. So being able to co-develop not only skills and training that is targeted towards them, but focusing on the verbiage that we use is crucial. It's important, and it really allows for caregivers to feel seen in the process.
Thanks, Malika. I love that. And I think, Mary, you can definitely like give a little bit more of like the caregiver perspective here. Because yeah, as Malika was saying, it can feel isolating at times. And so we'd love to hear more about what you think.
Yeah, thank you. Malika, that was beautiful. I like to start with a caregiver of every feeling equals a need. So I use the iceberg analogy. This is what I see. What's underneath? The emotion is what we are expressing. What's that emotion saying underneath? So it's bringing in support. And it's actually affirming too, right? All parents are like, oh, as soon as they get together and they're sharing their stories, they're like, oh, I'm not the only one. Not the only one who is struggling with my kids not wanting to go to school or all kinds of technology. Oh my gosh, that's a huge one I hear from my clients is technology is taking over. What's underneath? What are they spending all their time on that really we need to explore how to come alongside? So one way I support my clients is we use this thing called the pause. It's practice the pause, being present, attentive, understand, support, and explore. And I'm going to tell you a quick story from the support. So I had this group of parents, we're sitting together and we're talking about who's in your circle of support. Because we know research shows all kids need at minimum 5 caring, active adults to help them thrive, right? Active in their life. And these parents are like, they're looking down, they're like, don't look at me, that she might ask me who is in my circle. And they're doing oh my gosh, I can't think of anyone. And the more we just drilled into it and helped them uncover, they were like, you guys, I could like see the light bulbs going off. They're like, oh my gosh, this person did loan me their car, or I got to meet my neighbor and now we're walking together and we're doing childcare together. Hey, we get to do life together. So they're surrounding themselves with people that build them up too. It's moving from that isolation, woe is me, to literally going, I got someone in my court. I got someone that I can turn to and just ask for the love, the support that we all need. Um, that one really warmed my heart. Just like I said, to just see that light bulb come on, they're like, oh, I do have people in my court. I moved to this community and I know no one. And then we were just drilling in. So it's giving that compassion, that empathy, and empowering them to just explore. Maybe it's another way to say, who else can I lean on? It's not just me. I get to bring other people in. And I think that breaks down that stigma too, because stigma is heavy, right? It's so heavy that now they can be like, oh, I can bring this person in and they get to support and walk with me too.
Yeah, love that, Mary. Thank you so much. Craig is actually asking a question. What is the you in pause?
Yeah, it's so being present, attentive, understand it's listen to understand, support, and then the E is explore. How do we explore solutions together? I should have finished that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. We are going to be moving now on to the second question. I think something that I'm listening from the two of you is that, there's a lot of resources that need to be in place in order to better support youth mental health. But there's also some caregivers that might, like feel or remain resistant to engaging in dialogue around their youth mental health and well-being just because maybe they don't feel prepared. And so this question is like, how do you recommend kicking off a conversation with a caregiver who is resistant to discussing their child's mental health or who might still hold considerable stigma around the topic of mental health, which is kind of like very connected to what we were mentioning before. So Malik, I'm going to bring you back into this conversation to kick us off. We'd love to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, definitely. And this is so well timed for us right now. I'm currently on the ground in Minnesota, and I've been talking to clinics over here, just trying to see, from therapists, what are their perspectives on youth and family mental health? Where are their challenges? And time again, I am hearing, a parent comes into the clinic, drops their kid off, goes home, and they don't want to be involved in care at all. They want me to fix their child. And I understand this is coming from a place of frustration and wanting to involve. Oh, nice, Mary. I didn't know that. Luckily, we'll definitely connect. But one thing that's been really interesting is the verbiage that's being used in clinics to describe caregivers feeling opted in or opted out. And an interesting next question is, how are we as a clinic potentially isolating caregivers in the process? And how can we kind of break down the walls to welcome them in the process? One thing that we found out very early on in our process with Psyche is caregivers don't get active validation. No one is patting them on the back when they are juggling, career, multiple children, their relationships, their friendships, like any of their passions, and being able to say, I know that you are doing the best that you can to start off point blank. It's just not something that they hear enough. So to start off with that is incredibly valuable. And they know and feel and recognize that, yes, like I am feeling seen, I am working hard and I'm trying the best and I just need a few more tools in my tool belt. Number two is, letting caregivers drive the boat. We understand that they know their family best. So why don't we empower them with skills rather than pointing the finger to them and saying, this needs to be done next, you need to do this. Time and time again, we heard caregivers say, look, I kept trying to turn for help, but everyone told me what I was doing wrong and what I needed to do. And they didn't really listen to me and trust that I knew kind of where I wanted to go with my family. So asking the caregiver, what are you seeing in the home environment? What's really challenging for you? How can I be of best support to you? And then number three is making them feel like they are an agent for change and empowering them with those skills. Caregivers want to know that they can drive the boat, right? They can, implement skills in the home environment that can be the change for the family. So being able to, instead of boiling the ocean, being very tactical and saying, here are 1 to 3 goals maybe that the family can focus on. Is this something that feels comfortable to you? They say, yes, like I want to try this head on. Maybe there's challenges, maybe there's successes. You celebrate the successes, you support them through the challenges and let them know that, this is something that they can do. They should feel like they can implement this in the household. We're here to cheer them on throughout the way, and we're here to celebrate the successes when they finally realize them. So really inviting them in, being very tactical, very tangible on what can be achieved. And finally, just empowering caregivers. It opens so many doors. And I wish that not only clinics on the ground here in Minnesota can start to open the doors and open the conversation to that, but schools across the US, other clinics across the US, and other, touch points for community supports that want to involve caregivers.
Thank you, Malika. I'm gonna bring now Craig into this conversation because I know, Craig, you have like now kind of like the perspective from a caregiver, but also from a person who is really involved in the youth mental health landscape. And so I would love to hear what are your thoughts on this one.
Okay, very good. So as one who, as you said, comes from the perspective of being a caregiver for, again, almost 20 years now, where my journey started when my loved one was in their late adolescence, early adulthood, and actually continues as that loved one is now in their early 40s. So this has been a really long journey. I want to second and affirm everything that Malika said. I absolutely agree with that. And then I'll build on top of that, that approaching loved ones from a position of seeing them as partners and fellow sufferers versus seeing them as the problem and judging them, which is very deeply rooted in our psyche as a society. I think many of us don't remember that as early as the 1950s, the predominant view of the cause of mental illness was the mother. And that is an attitude that we now understand is false, but one which I think dies really hard. And so too often when the system is approaching the caregiver, they're coming from kind of this position of, we have this problem with your child, and you're obviously the problem and the cause of this. And that is the worst way to kind of start out what is supposed to be a collaboration over time to help a child regain wellness or to maintain wellness. So thus, there's a need for humility. There's a need for patience, which is really difficult in a society where we have been groomed to just take an over-the-counter remedy or a pill and it'll be okay tomorrow. Where here we're talking about souls, not just the physical, not biology. The other I would say is approaching from the position of wellness versus illness. It's so much easier for any family member to be receptive if you talk to me about how my child can be more well, versus starting from the stigmatized stance of your child is ill. I think at a system and a societal level, this also speaks to the idea that we really need to work at transitioning from what now is a sick care approach. We allow people to become sick and then work at how to get them well more than we work at how do we keep people well, even as we know that the nature of being human is aging, sickness, and death. All of us are susceptible to sickness, but we act as though, well, we don't need to worry about that until someone becomes sick. We really need to focus more on prevention and wellness. The other thing I'm going to add here, when it comes to the stigma thing, I'm so heartened to hear the use of the word social and emotional health, which in my perception is a sort of proxy, much less stigmatized proxy for mental health. It's so unfortunate that mental health is probably the only category of morbidity we have in our society where when we use the word health, we assume illness. Think about that, right? But to just approach from health and wellness or social and emotional health, I think takes a lot of the stigmatic charge and helps the family to relax and be more receptive. And then finally, I'm going to talk about community. So, when we get to the point of talking about mental health or mental illness, it's become a job of the system, something that a group of professionals and licensed individuals are going to do something about, where the caregiver stands on the outside of that. And yes, professionals do their job and they make their contribution, but prevention, wellness, and greater degrees of recovery, research shows us really has to do with how the community enters the equation, of which the caregiver is a huge part of that. So I'll leave my comments at that is not to go on too long, but this is what I've learned both in personal experience and in my research as a graduate public health student about what we can do better as a society, a system, communities, families, and individuals when it comes to this question.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Malika. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
This is so meaningful. You were mentioning, Craig, a little bit about the job of the system and then how professionals do their contribution and how caregivers also do that contribution as well. So I want to kind of like bring us back a little bit to the education system and how important it is to, like providing holistic and wrap around support for youth in and out of schools is really critical to best equipping them to navigate mental health challenges. And so I would love to get your thoughts on this question, right? So where do we see the biggest opportunities for collaboration and partnership between schools, caregivers, and digital innovations that support youth well-being? And Maria, I'm gonna open it up for you because I know you have a product that is really helping on this, and I would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, I've been a huge advocate of schools being this like front door to care in a way that, young people are spending the bulk of their time, hopefully, in schools, and their teachers and counselors and like our educators have visibility into things that families sometimes don't too, right? And can spot things before it gets to that sick point that Craig was talking about. So I think there's so much potential here. And I've also been, because I've been working in this space for the last 4 years, we've seen Craig mentioned the SEL world. We've also seen the cultural wars like that are kind of playing into this stigma as it relates to bringing in any sort of mental health support into schools. So as I was reflecting on this question, I'm like, what is the most needed sort of thing that's going to be the unblocker to these partnerships? And I really landed on transparency. Right. And like bringing in, I mean, we've talked about like communication and tools and verbiage and like the importance of all of those things. And I think that, at the end of the day, families want what's good for their kids, right? And if we fundamentally believe that, then we can align ourselves and align our solutions and show them how our solution is empowering that outcome in a very transparent way. So like this is something that we've struggled with a lot, frankly, which is why I wanted to, I thought talking about this was important, because for a lot of in our first couple of years, they're like, well, who's a coach? What is coaching? What are you going to talk to my kid about? What does this mean? What does this look like? Right. And there was parents had a lot of questions around how is Clayful going to support my youth? And what we've learned is that, again, transparency goes a long way. So what we did was actually launch Clayful for Caregivers for our partners. So now caregivers can go on, chat with the coach themselves, get an experience of it, right? And so now you're removing these barriers. It's like, wait, what is this like black box that I know nothing about? And then you're like, oh wait, I can use it too. Okay, like I can, try it out and see what it's like and get comfortable with it before, as opposed to just like outright rejecting it. So that's been our journey. And again, like I think if you approach everything you do through a lens of transparency, it can go a really, really long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, transparency should be like at the front of everything, actually. But Craig, I would love to hear your thoughts
Yeah.
as a caregiver as well, and as a person who has a lot of experience on this. What is
Yeah.
your approach on these, like technologies that have been emerging a lot in the last couple of years, supporting youth mental health at schools and outside of schools as well?
Yes, I'm going to piggyback. Maria, I love how you talked about the school as the front door for health. It got me thinking about the idea that, the clinic and the hospital is the front door for sickness in our society. But research is showing us more and more that the most fundamental needs of children outside of what their families provide for them in every area, from social, emotional, to physical, to nutritional, to movement, all of these aspects of health, that happens at schools. And we have this vocabulary. We talk largely about schools as places where we educate children, but schools really are places where we keep children well and healthy so that they grow into healthy adults and citizens. So I love how you talked about that. So within the school environment, think of school as a health resource going beyond an education resource. Community is really critical. And Maria, I loved what you said about the idea that you now have, I'll call it a toolkit for lack of a better term, where communities can actually achieve a greater degree of literacy and self-efficacy. Because it really is those near relationships. Maria, you talked about the 5 relationships, I think, that support the wellness of a child. The more that we can equip those relationships, they're right in the community, that's taking burden off of the system and actually driving down prevalence of illness and driving up prevention and wellness. And of course, schools, because that's where there's the greatest opportunities to schools to take advantage of that is where we could do it. Now, pivoting over to technology, a lot of my practice and my consultancy in this area we call technology-enabled wellness. There's also an element of digital minimalism that we might factor into that, which is about we learning how to use technology rather than it using us. And we learning how to use technology to actually achieve greater wellness and effectiveness as human beings versus kind of the shopping, working, entertainment equation that is overrunning us right now. And so the fact is that every digital technology that is already in the hands of our adults, caregivers, family members, and children with proper literacy, education, experimentation, modeling, and incentivizing could be used just as well to help we and our children sleep better, eat better, move more, relax better, and engage in relationship better. It is not that the technology is here to replace community, but to facilitate and enable community and wellness. So this is probably one of the biggest technological opportunities unrealized that we have as a society. And of course, schools are the place for this to happen. So even as I'm watching this movement around banning technologies in schools, and I think there's a place for that, I think that we need to, on a parallel track, also grasp the opportunity for creating better digital wellness literacy so that the technology is used in an appropriate way in context so that, yeah, it's locked away when it's a distraction, but it's also not neglected in those contexts where it can actually boost wellness. So I'll leave it at that, Viviana, but that's my thoughts on that. And I'm doing a lot of work along with others. There's a growing literature and variety of thought leaders that are advocating for digital minimalism and technology-enabled wellness. And this needs to be more and more mentioned in the school settings also.
Thank you, Craig.
Yep.
That was beautiful. Quick reminder, we are almost done with the questions. We have just 2 questions left. I know time flies when you're having fun. But quick reminder for our audience, if you have any questions, please just drop them in the Q&A menu that you have. It's just like kind of like a box with a question mark inside, and it says Q&A on the button. If you click on that one, you can type your questions, and then we can just address those questions here. But yeah, so Craig, I hear you saying that schools are at the forefront of youth development. And we also know that schools are just going through a significant shortage at this time, right? These innovations, such as Maria's and Malika's innovations, they can definitely support and supplement the care needed to really address youth mental health in the most efficient way. But as any other novel solution, there's some questions that come up and some concerns. And so one of these is some youth may share information about their mental health that they aren't comfortable with their caregiver being informed about. And these may be due to, fears of stigma around mental health, or the disclosure of an identity that isn't accepted at home, or that they might feel, rejection and all these things. And so my next question is mainly for Malika and Maria, that you guys are working on developing these solutions that can, serve as a supplement at schools. How do you balance a prioritization of maintaining and respecting youth privacy, confidentiality, and consent, while also navigating the need both for buy-in and legal compliance to involve caregivers in conversations about youth well-being? So Malika, I'm gonna start with you, and then we're gonna move with Maria as well.
Sure, definitely. And I will frame my response by saying that we at Psyche Care only interface with the caregivers. We don't have touch points with youth. And Maria is the expert there, so I will yield a lot of time to her. But I think it's equally important to voice the perspectives as someone that is building something primarily for caregivers, because there's a lot of additional considerations that we had to make. Day one, we were thinking, do we build a family mental health solution where we integrate youth perspectives and caregiver perspectives? There are a lot of incredible companies and organizations that are doing that work already. And what was interesting for us is caregivers are most of the time coming in through the door to leverage a platform like ours because they want to move the needle for their child. Very rarely have they accessed mental health before for themselves, right? So one thing that's really interesting about Psyche, because we don't involve the youth in any of our touch points, and a lot of the challenges are just self-reported on behalf of the caregiver, we're able to safeguard a lot of the challenges that the youth themselves face while centering the perspective of the caregiver and what we're trying to support. So what are the challenges that you face in the home environment? How can we be there as a support and a guide for you, and how you have experienced the challenges in your home environment? So one thing that's really interesting, and Maria, I love that you noted transparency, is being very clear with caregivers on what we can and can't do. We at Psyche Care do not involve the second caregiver, if there is one in the home environment, in these conversations, because we want to be able to be there for the caregiver that is showing up for Psyche peer support, for example. And then understanding that we're not trying to surveil their kid through the process, right? We are not hey, come back to us with everything that your child is doing and we'll talk you through it. We really want to center the caregiver's challenges and navigating what next steps are. So it's been really interesting in, working with caregivers and hearing from their perspectives a lot of I statements on what the challenges are in the home environment, because then we can skillfully tried to address those, mainly focusing on the caregivers' mental health for themselves, then talking about their communication, co-regulation, community building techniques, and ultimately, as self-reported by the caregiver, can see positive effects across the family. But I'm also excited to hear Maria's perspectives, because I'm curious on how she's been involving a lot of these balancing on prioritization and maintaining youth privacy, confidentiality, and all of these other considerations. So Maria, yeah.
Yes, I mean, the word prioritization I think is very well used here, right? Because there's a lot of things to think through and weigh out here. I think like I led with transparency because that is a foundation for trust. So I think like trust is by building that trust with caregivers and helping them realize that like, more information, like by knowing exactly what your student talked about does not mean that you have more control over them, right? It does not, that information does not equal control. And like, it's normal that the adolescent brain is craving independence, right? Kind of like bringing them into like what's going on sort of cognitively and helping them see, hey, are there other ways that you might want to engage? Like, do you maybe, we did a communication workshop with one of our partners where parents came with their child and with their adolescents, and they had to try out new listening techniques and new asking questions. And these are skills that like we don't necessarily learn. They're not modeling that on TV, Mary. So it's hard to know how to do these things if you're not taught how to do them or like intentionally thinking about them, right? So we've really found a way to, one, like we take safety super seriously, right? Like that's a non-negotiable. If a student is at risk of safety, we break confidentiality and we have to report to the right sort of people through our protocols. But then when it comes to just like the low level stuff, hey, it's almost like coaching the caregiver to like, how do you improve that relationship with your student? Because knowing like reading their diary isn't going to make them open up to you about it more, right? It might even push them away a little bit more. So how can you kind of balance out the giving them independence while also showing up in the way they need you to and in the way they want you to right now? And it is an incredibly tight balance. And there's certain times when we say, you know what, like we really value this relationship with this particular student, but their safety has to trump our relationship, and that's okay. And then of course, then we have to look at the legal perspective of like make sure every state has slightly different laws. They have laws about like what you can ask, what, especially with a lot of the parental rights stuff coming out. So just like be really aware of what new movements are coming out, not just as it relates to like in the mental health, like medical field, but rather in like schools and parental rights. A lot of it is being kind of built in there, like what surveys you can ask, what questions you can ask, and what consent needs to be provided actively or passively from guardians. So just be very aware of like the states that you're navigating in and what their rules are, that because you don't want, that's like the baseline, right? Like table stakes. And then you start talking about, okay, what are the experiences and how do we make sure that we're serving the right people in the right ways?
Totally. Thank you so much, Malika and Maria. That was a really loaded question. So we actually have two questions from our audience. And so I'm going to read it for the four of you speakers. And I'm going to also drop it in the chat just for you to be able to reread it if you need it. But the first one is, how do we ensure that caregivers and their loved ones affected by the digital divide can benefit from technology-enabled wellness resources? So dropping it on the chat just for you to be able to see it, but wondering who would like to take this one on.
Yeah, I'm fine to take this one, and I'll be succinct. Literacy and modeling. We can look at any number of movements that have occurred in our society in a decade or two, where we say, we never used to do that. We used to all smoke We used to never wear seat belts. And I could go on, right? We used to not use smartphones, all kinds of things. And we could also see we used to not litter. I'm sorry, we used to do a lot of littering. And you can see all kinds of examples of, some people call it social engineering, other people would call it public service campaigns, other people would call it opinion leadership, communications, by which we re-educate, develop new levels of literacy and awareness, and as a result of that, see massive changes in behavior in the society. And there's a whole other debate we can have about this. I can't get into today, obviously. But again, literacy, change how we think and see things, and modeling, because we are herd animals. And we're always looking to leaders and mimicking their behavior. And we know there are certain people in any group, society, community that when they begin to behave differently, you then see this movement towards the others in that community doing the same. I think that this is not something we can't do. It's something we've not been sufficiently motivated, incentivized, and savvy to do. But that's what I love about the work that I see Maria and Malika doing, because you guys are foreshadowing a much better future in this area than what has been our past, which I applaud you for, because I've got a grandson and he's 9. And we've got a decade before he reaches that age and in between, where I want to see a different outcome for him than what I saw for my other loved one. So thank you. And I'll stop at that.
Mary, please go. I saw you very excited about the modeling thing. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes, about modeling. But I think that I want to commend you, Craig. That was beautiful. What if we let down our guard and we were just like, let's figure this out together?
Mhm.
So many time, well, I'm the adult, I have the answer, versus young person, let's learn this together. How are we using these devices? Let's develop the critical thinking. Where's the truth in what you're reading? Where is that from? Oh yeah, we need to know it too. I mean, it's like assumption that we have it all figured out, but we're all new to this digital world and what we're living in. And what better way to do shoulder by shoulder learning than, hey kiddo, teach me, and maybe I know something that you haven't on this device, but we can totally
Mhm.
learn together and use a tool, a digital tool, for wellness, not I'm calling it a tool, not a toy, aren't I?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to keep in mind. It's not a time wait. It can be a time waste, yes, but we could find a way to use it as a let's build up and learn together. Truly, truly figuring out that critical learning. How and why, and does this align with my family values? And we get to have those conversations. So thrilled that someone wrote that question, because I was like, yes. So it was so good. Thanks.
thank you, Mary. Definitely, like building that bridge between generations and like learning from each other's. I think that's so important. Before we move into the last question, Craig, I see that you're typing an answer for the question that came up. Do you want to respond live or do you want to respond just in the written form?
I'll type the answer to make space for you to address other questions that might
Okay.
be on your list.
That sounds wonderful. Beautiful. So moving on to the final question. As you all know, Headstream is committed to supporting entrepreneurs who design and scale digital well-being products, both for use in and outside of schools. Knowing that navigating these conversations is a top-name challenge for entrepreneurs in this space, I would like to ask this last question. What is one piece of advice around caregiver involvement you'd like to give an entrepreneur who is working to provide digital mental health services to youth, especially those trying to reach youth via school or district adoption? So, Maria, I would love to hear from you first, and then we're going to move and we're going to finish this conversation with Mary.
Yes, so here is my secret. It's my mother. So I would recommend always like find a skeptical caregiver maybe in your life, maybe someone who like writes into your email one day giving you terrible feedback, scary feedback, and you're like, I totally hear you. Can I ask you some questions? But like for me, initially, it's like I shared at the beginning, we're Colombian, mental health is not really a thing that we talk about. And my mom, love her, she is quite overbearing and very helicopter parenty, lots of things, trauma to talk through anyway. But from the very beginning, like in high school, we had a lot of issues because she really wanted to keep me in like her little bubble and control everything about me, and I was not having it. That's why I say adolescent brain is seeking independence, right? So any time that I have new one pager, a consent form, our parent website, I send it to her and I'm like, would you have let me use this when I was in high school? And I remember the first time I shared it with her, she's like, oh no, definitely not. Like, I need to know like everything that you're talking about. I need to know all these things. And we made so many iterations because of her feedback. Now I use ChatGPT and I tell it, you are a skeptical parent, da, 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 and can, have found other ways to get that type of feedback. But I feel like, I mean, Malika, you started talking about the importance of verbiage from the very beginning. And like, there's so much nuance in words. And if we can just, in our copy, in the way that we talk to someone, really meet them where they're at and respect their beliefs and respect where they're coming from, make them feel heard, that that changes everything, right? So find ways and tools and people that can help you do that in an effective way.
Thank you, Maria. Mary, I'm gonna let you continue with this for sure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's partnership, right? It's how do we come along? And even when I did that thing about let's learn together, let's do shoulder by shoulder, shoulder to shoulder learning, it's finding ways to partner, letting our guard down. I like to use when I'm doing speaking gigs is that we armor up. We're a society that as the adult, I have it all figured out. And we get so strong in that we forget to say, I get to ask for help too. What are our kids learning if we're like, oh, you have it all figured out, mom, dad, parent? Well, now I'm scared to go talk to my math teacher because I should have it figured out. I shouldn't be able to. And what if they saw us as adults going, I need help too. I do need to reach across the aisle and say, let me learn from you. I get to ask my kid to teach me too, right? So when I say talk about learning from our kids, I have a really cool thing that I learned from many presentations that I have been part of. And this comes from, it's a resource. I'm going to give you another acronym. I must love acronyms. But it's from the Children's Screen Time Action Network. And it's listen with care, respond with love. And the care is curiosity, an open mind, respect, and empathy. And then respond with love. So I can get this in my parents. If we can get this in all parents, listen with care, respond with love. Ask lots of open-ended questions. Be a scientist. Keep learning, 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 right? Bring optimism, validation. Every coaching call I do, parents, validate your kid. Don't come in to fix it. As soon as you fix it, you're diminishing that child and they're like, well, what's wrong with me? I want to empower my parents to just be like, wow, that sounds like it was a really hard day. Go to that curiosity, right? Tell me about it. Where did you have any joy in your day? Where did you have any struggles? Validate, validate, validate. And then build the engagement. So listen with care. It's curiosity and open mind, respect and empathy, respond with love. Lots of questions, optimism, validation, and engagement. What if we gave that opportunity to all so that we could show up that way and build that partnership that caregivers, that our kids need, that our schools need? Partnership.
Wonderful, Mary and Maria. Thank you so much for giving so much insight into this question. And I'm just going to restate a comment that I was sharing here, but yes, to showing that it's okay to be vulnerable, that we don't have to know all the answers, that we can also ask for support, and that is a learning opportunity to work together. So going back to your last point, Mary, it's all about partnership. And so with that said, we're done with all the questions. My heart is so full right now. I feel like we covered so many things. We untangled a lot of amazing and meaningful information and conversation here. And so just to wrap us up, we're going to be pulling a really quick survey just to understand, how especially like the attendees, our audience experience these webinars so we can continue improving in the future. And while you are all doing that, I just really want to say thank you to all the speakers for the meaningful contributions, for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your expertise, and like also being vulnerable because it's not easy to be part of these, spaces. Thank you so much for the attendees for joining these conversations and for your thoughtful questions as well. And I also just want to invite everybody to continue just learning about our upcoming webinars. You can visit our website at headstreaminnovation.com. And we're really looking forward to seeing you in other conversations that we might be having in the upcoming months. So thank you so much, everybody. If you please have time, please help us just filling up these questions in here. It's going to really be very helpful for us to continue improving in the future. Yeah, I don't know if any of the speakers, do you have any like wrap up comments, thoughts that you want to share?
Yes, I've answered 3 questions in the Q&A, so I hope people see and pick that up as a takeaway also. But this has been really enjoyable. And I'll say finally, I'm so appreciative for the work of Headstream Innovation and how the organization has given a voice and a space to young people to be a part of the solution. And in partnership with we adults, I mean, I'm almost 60, so I'll be the adult here, who have done the best we can, but alas, have only done as much as we can. So it really is time for a next generation to be given the opportunity to step forward and for we to bring our experience, wisdom, and resources to support that. And I'm grateful for how Headstream Innovation plays a role in that.
Oh, Craig, thank you so much for your kind words. We're doing the best that we can and, like building the bridges, bringing the people that are relevant to have these conversations and just like really trying to break the stigma around because unfortunately, 2025 and mental health continues to be a really important stigma in our society. And it's time to break those barriers so we can really, prioritize mental health the same way that physical health is prioritized. And so, with that said, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And we'll see you next time for sure. Have an amazing week, everybody.
All right, be good, everyone. Take care now and stay
Bye.
cool.